pipelines and canals could carry water to the western Great Plains to replenish aquifers and reduce demand on the Colorado River.
Why can't we put that water to beneficial use?
The most astounding version of the plan, some would say the craziest version, is to bring Mississippi water here to Utah's San Juan River, where it would flow down the canyons to Lake Powell.
John Hollenhorst has been doing this stuff for so many years that many styles have come and gone. Wait a minute, was this ever a style? Come on, John, really?
I think the Ford-Reagan tussle that's going on here in this convention has diverted a lot of attention from the platform.
That was John's very first live shot, July 1976. He wasn't even a reporter yet. He was an assignment desk assistant hired to answer the phones. They threw him into the fray at the state Republican convention, untested on camera.
Let's sweep around the hall now and talk to some of those reporters and see what they've been finding out. First, we go to John Hollenhorst.
Spence, I've been keeping an eye on the debate over the platform for the Republican Party. Last night they started debating the platform about 10:15 or 10:30. By that time, a lot of the delegates had decided it was time to go home, so I understand there were only about 700 to 800 people here during that debate. The platform that they were considering was worked out by a committee over the last few weeks, and it was pretty much acceptable to most delegates, and I don't think there was too much controversy over it, although some of them took it seriously enough to be here until about 1 o'clock in the morning.
Were you here with them, John?
I was here part of the time, Spence. I think the Ford-Reagan tussle that's going on here in this convention has diverted a lot of attention from the platform.
For some reason, KSL took a chance on a guy dressed like that. Maybe it was because he overcame the odds of a couple of weeks before. He brought home from Wyoming an interview with a movie star who was supposedly unavailable for interviews. Yep, John Wayne, the first person John Hollenhorst ever interviewed on camera. A few weeks later, KSL promoted John to full-time reporter covering the courts. What an assignment that turned out to be. Within weeks, one of the biggest stories of his eventual career, murderer Gary Gilmore demanded to be executed in Utah, the first execution in America since the Supreme Court halted capital punishment a decade before.
That sensational development drew reporters, movie makers, and literary agents to Utah in unprecedented numbers. Gilmore, despite his record of brutality, had become news, big news. And that was an aggravation to many people in Utah. Although no one seemed to consider the killer a hero, many people thought reporters were trying to make him into one. The case isn't over yet. Gilmore sits today in his cell at the Utah State Prison. The date is now set for January 17th, but that date too could slip by without an execution. No one can say for sure whether Gilmore will ever receive the punishment he seems determined to accept. John Hollenhorst, Channel 5 Eyewitness News.
CBS Reports with Bill Moyers continues.
I think the one thing that we are going to need to worry about, assuming this thing does come off.
CBS focused part of its execution coverage on KSL's newsroom.
In the final week of the countdown, Gary Gilmore's own private deadline and that of the media now grimly intertwined.
Because there are going to be multiple aspects to cover right there. There will be a vigil by opponents of capital punishment.
For their reporting of the story,
now Gary Gilmore has been executed.
John and KSL reporter Jack Ford were awarded the National Headliner Award for coverage of breaking news.
The Army's saving some 300 wild Mustangs on its base in Utah from the effects of the drought by offering them different, but not necessarily better, fates. John Hollenhorst of KSL TV has a report from Dugway, Utah.
Using a helicopter and a team of hired wranglers.
Just a few months into the job, John made the first of many, many trips to Colorado City.
As anyone can remember, the town has been dominated by polygamists.
He looked into the allegations of illegal shenanigans at the grade school.
We tried to get a response from officials of the school, but discovered the press is not welcome in Colorado City. I mean, do you think we don't have a right to shoot film here?
What's your last name?
My name is John Hollenhorst. What's yours?
How do you spell it?
Hollenhorst. How do you spell yours? Are you an official of the school?
Yes, sir.
Do you think we don't have a right to shoot film here?
Finally, the hair and the clothes started to get better. And then John found what he still considers one of the best long-running stories he ever covered, the saga of John Singer. He refused to send his kids to school and triggered a siege by defying court orders and resisting arrest.
Tonight, in the second part of a close-up report, John Hollenhorst focuses on another issue of that family, the isolation of the Singer children from society.
It's been about 5 months now since any of the Singer children have left the property. But John Singer says that before all his legal difficulties began, the children had plenty of social contacts outside the farm.
We don't have to hide here.
But you kind of do, don't you? You don't spend much time off the farm.
Well, we have to stay around our place. We have to stay around here. Nowadays, the stuff that we hear on television, what's happening and stuff, I'm glad our Father's keeping us in. It's better not to know what's going on, the trash and everything. Our daddy is keeping us kids clean from all this junk.
I don't want my children to be a friend of the world and thereby become an enemy to God. I want my children to be friends of God. And if it takes a life of isolation to accomplish this, that they will grow up to be decent individuals, then it will have to be so. We have to withdraw from a society whose fruits just plainly stink.
John Singer was later shot and killed when he pointed a gun at officers. Those two children grew up and launched their own siege 9 years later, in which young Timothy Singer shot and killed a law enforcement officer.
This is an Eyewitness News special report. The Bundy verdict. Guilty.
Good evening. I'm John Hollenhorst reporting from Miami, Florida. For a long time, residents of Utah, Colorado, and Washington have been following an incredible mystery story, a story of murder, imprisonment, and escape. And all along, there has been one fascinating question. Could a handsome, articulate, intelligent law student with a promising career in politics, could Theodore Bundy be a crazed sex killer responsible for the brutal murders of perhaps dozens of young women all across the West?
John helped KSL pioneer the new era of coast-to-coast satellite coverage. And then an offer came that was too good to refuse. John left us and headed off to Dallas, Texas to work for WFAA television. KSL said goodbye on the air.
John came to KSL 4 years ago. He started with no TV experience, but he did have something extra.
I'll never forget the time John first walked into our office. He was driving a cab in Salt Lake City, and we had a job open as a desk assistant. I used to answer the telephones. And there were a couple other people that were graduating from college that were really on paper a little more qualified. John had been working for a newspaper only in Minneapolis. And we had one of those, if you will, a gut feeling that there was a guy that knew journalism, the right kind of attitude about things, and so we decided to give him a chance. And we've never been more right about anybody.
John went on to cover some interesting stories for WFAA.
The sheriff of Dallas County is one tough customer.
He was with Channel 8 News in Dallas for 2 years, 1980 and 81.
This week on News 8.
The time is rapidly approaching where the information on who the communists are in this country is going to be very valuable.
In a move to reveal the reality behind the Ku Klux Klan, News 8's John Hollenhorst was blindfolded and taken to the secret location of the Klan's regional computer used to compile secret enemy lists. News 8 reporters uncovering the hidden story like no others. News 8, keeping you on top of the news.
But the KSL family reached out and brought John back into the fold for a 4-year stretch in Bonneville's Washington News Bureau.
We have SRB ignition and liftoff.
One of his big assignments was covering the first U.S. Senator in space, Jake Garn of Utah. John followed Garn through his training and then anchored hours of live coverage from Cape Canaveral. In all, John watched 5 space shuttle launches in his career. He covered the shuttle program from beginning to end, from the very first engine test in Utah in 1977 to the last shuttle launch in 2011. In Washington, John covered big news and small news, sometimes very small if it had a local twist.
For some 10-year-olds, winding up on the front page of USA Today might be the pinnacle of achievement. That happened today to Nathan Hadfield. For others, lunch at the White House might be a worthy goal. That happened today to Nathan Hadfield. And how about presenting the president with a membership card in the Cub Scouts? That also happened today to Nathan Hadfield.
We are glad that you are continuing to serve as the Boy Scouts of America's honorary national president.
Thank you very much.
And how many 10-year-olds get to help the president blow out the candles on the Boy Scouts' 75th birthday cake? You guessed it, Nathan Hadfield did it, even though he was hidden from view by a slightly larger scout. So, with all that to be proud of, life is all downhill from here for Nathan, wouldn't you think? Well, not quite.
When I came here, you know, I didn't really know what I was going to grow up, but I sort of wanted to be the president of the United States, and I think I might have made up my mind.
Before he hits the campaign trail, though, Nathan still has a little bit of schooling left in front of him. He figures he'll be specializing in math and science. Incidentally, when Nathan gets around to counting up the electoral votes, he'll have one advantage. He already can name all 50 states in 25 seconds or less.
Mississippi, Alabama, Maine, Hampshire, Vermont, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania.
John Hollenhorst, Eyewitness News at the White House.
North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida.
But it was the state of Utah that pulled John back to KSL. In 1986, he came back and plunged into the environment beast, minus the mustache.
And there's another thing that really enrages the park rangers. Some people go to all this trouble to get in here and see the spectacular scenery, and when they see it, they deface it by scratching their names or their initials into it. That's right, graffiti scratched into some of the greatest scenery on Earth.
John has had many, many great assignments over the years. A lot of us are very envious of him for that. But one he considers the greatest of all, a trip to France in June 1994, the 50th anniversary of D-Day. He did a week of coverage and co-anchored a primetime special with Dick Norris, focusing on Utah veterans.
For every life lost 50 years ago, what else was lost? What works of genius were never created? What triumphs went unrealized? What loves never happened? Fate dealt a mean hand at Normandy, and the play was ruled by chance. 50 years of life, that and more is the gift handed to Hugh Nibley by fate the night before D-Day. He had one of the most dangerous assignments at Normandy, crash landing in a glider behind enemy lines.
I was just getting into the glider. I was to be number one man and number two glider, and they said, you have to get out, and General Pratt has to take your place, and you will take his Jeep over. And of course, General Pratt was killed sitting in my place, sitting in the spot I should have been in.
The general died, Nibley lived, just barely. The next morning he drove General Pratt's Jeep ashore from a ship, seconds before it was sunk by Nazi guns.
And they were following us with an 88. They were trying to get us so hard, but they hit the ship just as we came down.
Nibley went on to a 50-year career as a distinguished classical historian, 50 years to contemplate fate, chance, and the chaos of war.
Just last year, John had a chance to revisit World War II, this time for the 70th anniversary of Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor radically changed America in a way that's difficult for younger generations to fully understand, even through the lens of the 9/11 attacks. It's now up to us to pass on to future generations the hope and the promise to remember.
John has always loved doing those big, serious stories, but he likes the fun ones too, like the time he went on the trail of Bigfoot and found him.
And then there's this video, shot in southeastern Idaho.
Okay, it's just me, the reporter. You see how easy it is to fake this stuff?
John is willing to go deep into a story, as he did when he profiled a scientist who goes canoeing on a lagoon at a gigantic pig farm.
A pond of pig poop and urine 25 feet deep.
It's pure science. This is what scientists do.
Some say this guy deserves a Nobel Prize and a canoeing merit badge.
If you tipped over, what would be worse, dying or not dying?
To understand this dedication to science, we headed into the lagoon ourselves. Journalism, too, can be a dirty job.
Well, if that guy gets a Nobel Prize for this, I at least ought to get an Emmy out of it.
Prizes or not, science marches on, even if it's up the proverbial creek with a paddle. John Hollenhorst, Eyewitness News, Beaver County.
Twice, John has been attacked on the job by killer bees.
It is an extraordinary feeling to be standing here with thousands of bees with only one thing on their mind, killing you.
I am through. I've been stung once and I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going home.
Well, Bob survived and so did I.
For decades, photographer Bob Greenwell was John's partner, teammate, and occasional nemesis. Bob seemed to enjoy putting John in jeopardy. John survived, and he's still hanging in there, looking for the good stories.
Check this out. I'm on TV, right? You probably figure it's a cameraman shooting it from the ground. But in fact, this is a commercial drone, and it can really fly. And I mean fly. There are 8 million stories in the Naked City. This has been one of them. John Hollenhorst, Eyewitness News.